the topic I'm going to be covering in this video is one island, two different lives. One nation, two different experiences. One island that I'm talking about in this specific video, as you can probably tell around you, is the UK. The UK is the island in question. And the two different lives, or the two different life experiences that I'm talking about in this video are, nowadays in this country, you're either poor or you're rich. There's no in between. And the little in between that there was, or that there used to be, is now very quickly dissipating. And this government, this nation and its old ways is now slowly returning, because if you know Britain, if you've ever lived here, or if you know the history of it, it's been a very classist country ever since its first beginnings, since its roots. It's deeply, the classist system is deeply rooted in the history of this country and the way it's been run. And I could tell you that from my first ever experience arriving in this country at the age of 12, where I was being told that I am the poor working class and my classmates, they're the upper middle class or lower middle class. And that's something that I've never experienced, you know, being from an Eastern European country where everyone is pretty much equally poor, unless you're involved in a government or mafia, which I suppose in one way or another is no different in this country, is it? I can just about hear the ice cream man in the background. I'm quite far away from any street right now, so he must be absolutely blaring the tunes. Let me know in the comments below if you grew up in the UK, remember the old ice cream vans, the old 90s Smiley transits with banana engines, actually, they used to have. That's the nickname for the engines of those old transits. So, as I've just mentioned, I first started experiencing and seeing this classist system in my very, very earliest days that I spent here in the UK, being, you know, 11, 12 years old in school, and imagine being told that you are the poor working class and you are essentially in servitude of the rich, you know, people running this country, or of the upper middle classes running this country, or the upper class essentially. And from the very early days you've come to this country, you've been told that you are now beneath what is regarded as the norm in this country, you know. It almost seems like the people in power and the government is really doing their best efforts at trying to turn one another against each other, especially when it comes to working class or, you know, just your ordinary people in this country. They really are trying their best to make them hate each other, essentially, to not notice and be distracted from the reality of what's happening around this country and what's being done to us average ordinary people. So recently, this is something that I've started to notice more and more, this sort of class system in the UK, and how the UK is now essentially becoming another third world country when it comes to the class. It's becoming another developing country, as you may, you know, compare it to Brazil or India, where you just have rich people and then you just have poor people. There's no in between, and if there is, it's extremely small minority that is stuck in between. And for many a year of me growing up in this country, there was actually some sort of hope, chance, and some sort of future for the middle class in this country, for the people who had their careers, had their jobs, owned their houses, but they weren't, you know, super well off. They weren't super rich. They didn't own loads of assets. They didn't own loads of capital, but they just about got by. They owned what they had, and they were able to afford a family and afford a reasonably comfortable life without having any riches. Okay, that's now gone. That's now been taken away from people, and we essentially going back to Charles Dickens times in the 1800s. And reading at the moment, or rather listening to, either let me know in the comments if you've been able to focus on reading, because my ADHD brain seems to struggle with it, actually, and I seem to just be able to listen to audiobooks. And also it's probably the fact that we're all just constantly working non-stop, isn't it? We're constantly just doing something that needs to be monetized, so we don't really have the time, as we used to back in the day, to wind down and actually focus on important things like ourselves and reading and our own time. So recently I've been reading Oliver Twist, and or listening to rather Oliver Twist, and a hell of a lot of experiences, a hell of a lot of things that he that's covered in that book is things that I'm starting to fucking see reappear here on the streets in the UK. Poverty, people having to go to food banks, people working full-time jobs and yet still not being able to afford their fucking meals. It's incredibly windy right now, Jesus Christ. This is what the summer in the UK can be sometimes. I'm wearing a t-shirt and I'm wearing shorts and it's actually very warm, but windy as fuck, and it could rain any second. You just never know what happens in this country. This is something that, as someone living in this country and someone working in a very predominant industry, which is the motorsport and specifically Formula One industry in this country, and if you know your Formula One or even British history, you know that this sport is very deeply enrooted in the British culture, in the British history. The first ever Formula One race took place in Britain at Silverstone, which is a track still used in F1 to this day. Now, working in this industry, I get to come across a hell of a lot of different people and different classes, different backgrounds of people. And something that I've been noticing and experiencing recently in this country is the fact that I work with two different generations. Generation one is the boomer generation, the older generation who are now fairly close to retiring, mind you. Now, this older generation, which I speak of, I've noticed their wealth and the things that they concern themselves with, the things they talk about on a daily basis are very different compared to the struggles and concerns of the younger generations that I tend to work with or tend to come across in my field of work. So these older generations, their main concern seemed to be which second holiday of this year they're going to take their family onto, which house of theirs they're going to sell and buy a different one, which car they're going to sell and buy a different one, which modification for their car, or which furniture to furnish their house with, or materialist wealth and bullshit of these aspects, in my opinion, because there's so much more to life than bullshit we own, holidays we go on, the fucking houses and assets that we own, isn't it? Because by the time, a few years after we die, no one's going to remember us, let alone the bullshit that we owned. But that's just a gimmick that I always say. Whereas compared to these young people, these younger generations that I come across, that I work with, they seem to be concerned with a lot more important and a lot more negative and a lot more realistic aspects of this country and of the world and what's happening right now. Things like they're worried about being sick and taking a fucking few days off because that's going to hit their finances, and they're going to therefore be able to save less, and the money that they would be able to save for that week is going to drastically go down by that much, because fortunately most of us now are contractors, most of us are now freelancers, most of people, to be honest, working worldwide are now freelancers, because that's what these corporations and companies prefer, because they can get rid of you straight away without any repercussions. They don't have to pay you sick pay, holiday pay, etc. But you still have, that freedom of being a contractor and essentially dealing with them the exact same way, because business is business. There is no loyalty in business anymore. The division amongst society and people as well, where you got the young generations shitting on the old generations for ruining the economy, but then you've got the old generations shitting on the young generations for either being lazy or not wanting to work, rightfully so, by the way, because why the fuck would they want to work for peanuts, for nothing? Like, why? You might as well not work and take advantage of the system which has been there, put in place for you if you don't want to work, than working for absolutely nothing and living the exact same life and still barely just getting by in the exact same way. Do you know what I mean? And whilst it might be very easy for some people to say, oh, just fucking go and make more money. Do you know what I mean? Oh, just go and do this, just go and do that, just go and invest there. It's like the whole thing of homeless people. Why don't you just all go and buy a house? Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's a fucking joke. Because for those of you that might know and might be clued up, the fact is, if you were born into a rich family, if you were hanging around a dad, a mother who had a hell of a lot of disposable income, assets they were investing into, stocks and shares, fucking whatever, bonds, anything they were investing into, anything they were, the money being saved, the conversations being had in that household, the perception of money being an asset, a key to freedom, a key to wealth, is a lot more engraved in that child's mind than another child who grew up around or in a family which, you know, by no means were they poor, but they were getting by, just about getting by enough for nobody to complain, for nobody to kick up a fuss, but also getting by only to a point where they didn't have a massive amount of disposable income. They didn't have a lot of money to invest or save. They just about had enough to survive reasonably comfortably, right? Now, which one of those children do you think has a better perception of money? Essentially, how money is just a fucking debt, right? Money is just an idea of debt. That's all it is. It hasn't got real value. It's just the numbers on a screen. We all just add value to it by understanding and mutually agreeing that these numbers on a screen have a fucking value. It's ridiculous. Just thinking about it, do you know what I mean? Beautiful day, man. Jesus Christ. Those are the first people down there that I'm actually seeing today. And you know, I ain't even complaining. Now, this isn't just an issue tied to classes. This isn't just an issue tied to generations and a generational issue between boomers, between Gen Z, between millennials, etc. This is an issue tied to perception of money. This is an issue tied to old money and new money around this country, and how essentially hard and almost impossible it is for a poor, a working class person in this country to break out of their bubble, of their ecosystem, and become middle class or become upper middle class, become fucking, you know, very well off person. It's essentially impossible because this country doesn't want that to be possible. This system doesn't want that to be possible. And why would they want that to be possible? You know, they'll do whatever they can, whatever's in their power, to make your life easier if the the wealth of rich people isn't at stake. You know what I mean? I've just unlocked another level of this field. This is incredible. You can't make this shit up. I've not even been to this part of the field. It's only around the corner from my house, which just goes to show how little time we spend in nature just doing nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like we used to back in the day. Because where do we spend our time now? In fucking little office blocks. Now, my friends, I don't know about you, but I do actually reckon that something's got to be done. Something needs to happen. Do you know what I mean? How can you have a supposedly, you know, global 5 or global top 6 country when you've got two classes living in a country, either millions and millions of poor people or a handful, a few thousand of very wealthy rich people who essentially own majority of the assets and capital of this country? And don't even get me started on the selling out of this country and how essentially the majority of this country is owned by foreign investors or fucking global conglomerates like BlackRock, do you know what I mean, which owns hell of a lot of housing around this country. And how do you expect to raise the birth rates and to raise the domestic population of this country where, on the other hand, you invite companies like BlackRock and like other places like that to buy the houses and buy fucking streets and streets of thousands of houses in order for them to just rent it out for a ridiculous amount of rip-off money to poor people around this country, just to keep them in debt, just to keep them poor. Do you know what I mean? How are you expecting any of that to change? And I think something is also got to be done about owning multiple properties in this country, because one thing is capitalism and, you know, open market and being able to make as much money as possible. The other thing is giving that opportunity to more people. Do you know what I mean? If you're going to give that, if you're going to have one person who understands how money works because they grew up around in that echo chamber of money, and then they buy out the properties, they buy out multiple properties, and then they use that knowledge they now have on enlarging that wealth they have, right, and taking the opportunity away from a young family which otherwise might be able to afford that property, because another person who already has 2 other properties has bought another one just to rent it out to that young family and keep them poor. And that right there, my friends, is your reason to why most young people, most people my age, excluding me because I have other reasons, more, I don't know, I guess more maybe philosophical reasons why I don't want to have and I'm not going to have children. But most young people, believe it or not, they do want to have kids. They do want to have children, contrary to many people's beliefs, many older generations' beliefs. But they can't fucking afford it. And unless any of this changes, that isn't going to change either. And believe me, one thing is true and one thing is for sure. The future of this world, the future of this society does lie in our hands. And we've got the advantage of time. We've got the advantage and the power of time, where most of my generations are either in their early to mid-teens or, early to mid-20s. We had a future of this country, a future of this world, if you think about it. And whilst you might have the older generations, now retiring and thinking, oh, I'm going to enjoy my pension, I'm going to enjoy my time. How are you going to enjoy that when you haven't got anybody to work for your pension? You haven't got anybody to adding into that pot of pensions. You haven't got anybody working these blue-collar jobs. Do you know what I mean? Like, how is the society expecting to capitalize on the future young generations when all they're doing is sinking them deeper into debt, not just financial but mental debt as well? And don't expect them to then work for you and then look after you in your old age, when all you're doing to them is taking opportunity to have family, opportunity to live a decent, comfortable life without having to worry about things that destroy you as a person, like financial struggles, like work stress and burnout, like lack of connection and lack of family, lack of friends, because we live in a very individualistic society now where most of the people, believe it or not, don't even have a single friend they can turn to and rely on. And yeah, what else can I say about that? Do you know what I mean? What else can I say about that? But it's super windy, if you can hear me, because these trees are so loud. Well, I can't complain about it because they've been here for a hell of a lot longer than I have. So they'll probably think the same about me because I'm fucking shouting out here, ain't I? This was just a quick little ramble video I wanted to make about my thoughts, about the things that have been on my mind a lot recently, about the inequality, division of society, and the perception of Britain which no longer exists. A perception of Britain that hell of a lot of foreigners seem to have before they come to this country, only to face a rude awakening once they finally get here. And that isn't just with the division of classes, but also the rubbish on the streets, the piles of rubbish on the streets, the massive potholes in the roads, and the dilapidated state of this country. But that's something we can cover in a different video. That's a different topic. So thank you very much for spending your time with me. I appreciate every single one of you and the time that you spend with me, because I understand that time is our most valuable asset and it's finite. And if you spend your time with me here, philosophizing, thinking, talking and sharing ideas, I honestly can't ask for any more. Do you know what I mean? Like the video if you like it, but you don't have to. Subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. Do you know what I mean? I would appreciate that, don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, it's just fucking numbers. One thing I care about the most is your opinions, your thoughts, and your comments below. So, once again, thank you very much, my friends. I enjoyed spending our little time together, and I'm going to probably film another video right now straight after, maybe something a little bit more positive. I'm going to leave you with this absolutely beautiful view right here. Thanks for your time once again. I'll see you a lot in a bit.